Welcome back to Zero Gravity Live, your weightless monthly tech talk podcast, bringing all the latest discussions right to you and your feed. My name's Anthony Cusimano, and I'm joined by my two besties, Mr. Matt Price and Mr. Sterling Wilson. How y'all doing today?
Doing good, bro. How are
Feeling
you?
great. Indeed. How's it going?
Doing well. And it's been a minute since we've been here. I think we're coming at you a little later in the month than we normally do. Usually it's the third Tuesday. We saw how long July was and said, you know what? Let's just do it on a later Tuesday. Why not? Trick things up a little bit. Hey, do y'all have anything cool going on in your office? Oh, yeah. And good call out, bringing up that little thing on the bottom. We want to know where you're watching from. So be sure to let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. We'd love to give you a shout out. Matt, I think you brought something cool today, right? Well, you didn't bring it, but.
So basically, I brought a piece of nostalgia I figured I would share with everyone watching. And this is technically not in my office. It's a little bit too big, but it's probably about 20 feet in the basement under a table. And let me show you guys this. So the story behind this old phone, for those of you who watch, actually know what this is, right? This is a pay phone. Should be coming up momentarily here.
It says processing.
There we go.
There we go.
Did it show up?
It was a 1990s
I see it.
moment.
I see it.
Right. It was going through the landline, so it took a minute. So basically the story behind this is been sitting in my parents', workshop for probably decades. It's older than I am, of course. It was in our house when I was born. And this came out of New York City, one of the phone booths that were down there in New York City. And, my late father mounted it to this piece of wood and built the sign, all calls 5 cents. And I was just like, I don't have any new tech physically in my office, but I thought this would be really cool to throw up and just kind of talk about how far technology has evolved from the old days of going in a glass cage of emotion and placing phone calls on something like this, right? So super cool. And I brought this home just to keep, for nostalgia's sake. So what do you guys think?
I have a question. Does it work?
Oh,
So the mechanics work, the door opens for the change return, but obviously the cable's not working, and it probably could be made to work again if you had, an old school POTS line in your house that you could connect to, but I haven't tested.
you know what's pretty awesome and how timely this is I just saw something, and I cannot remember what state it was in, but there's a gentleman who's actually going around and gathering up these old, mostly now defunct payphones, maybe not that old, Matt, but he's actually placing them around small rural towns and neighborhoods where you have kids who actually don't have cell phones yet, need to call their parents to bring them home for school, or other families that need to reach family members that are actually not in. So I love that you actually brought this up. I'm seeing them sort of be repurposed using with the traditional POTS line, as we like to call them too. So I think that was very timely. I don't have anything to show today, but I'll just tease this by saying I'm going to have something to show the next show, and it's going to be very, very timely and fall into this space. So watch this space.
Our next show is going to be epic. I don't want to spoil too much, but we're going to be joined by special guest Brian Beeler from Storage Review, talking all about some of the object first hardware. So, you're just going to make it a double header. It's going to be awesome. A show for the ages. It's sounding like.
Going to be
I have something to share with y'all. So before I show it, question to both of you. You're familiar with the old arcade fighting games like Street Fighter, Tekken, Fatal Fury. You know these things, right? So when you're in an arcade, what are your hands doing?
They're moving.
Joysticks and buttons.
Joysticks and buttons. Okay. You said the word I wanted you to say, Matt. So I want to show you something. This is called a hitbox. And you'll notice it's flat. It's got that traditional arcade layout, but there's no joystick. And that's because your left, down, and right are all on buttons. And your jump is down here. So what that allows you to do is, like, if you're familiar with Street Fighter, if you want to make Ryu do a fireball, you have to go down, right, right. With this, it's literally that fast. So for a while in tournaments, these things were even banned because they're too fast. They're too fast, right? Like it takes all the challenge out of having to do the joystick motions, but not anymore. Now these have kind of become the de facto standard. So I finally got one. This one's really cool. It's got like a glass plate here. It's got lots of buttons. It's got switches over here, so you can plug it into your Xbox, computer, your Nintendo Switch. It's really, really fun. And I've been replaying some Street Fighter with this bad boy, and it's been so much fun. I'm not great at those games. I've always wanted to be. Yeah. This definitely helps me be better. So very glad for technology for the weirdos like me out there.
What about what I'm thinking about Mortal Kombat or some of the other ones? What's one, my favorite one was the one with Ukyo with the long sword, the Samurai Showdown. But a lot
Samurai
of them
Showdown.
Are pretty complicated. Like you're talking about the fireball, right? Or Liu Kang or whatever. But there's also the fatalities, the babalities. There's also all the. Can you
the friendships
execute those?
Yes, absolutely. So it would be a little harder for let's see, if you're like I can't think of the Mortal Kombat equivalent, but a lot of Mortal Kombat combos, it's left, right, down, left, right, up, whatever. So if you can remap your brain, because this is up basically, you want to hit up on the jump button. If you can remap your brain to it, yes, absolutely. Where this doesn't do well is for characters like Zangief from Street Fighter. All of his combinations are big circles. So you can't really do circles with this unless you got to muscle memory it. Like you really have to learn. And the problem is your right hand is jumping, but your left hand is moving. So you're going to struggle with the circle moves. Yeah. That's really the only limitation. Yeah. Any charge, like Mortal Kombat has a lot of like you hold back and then forward. Like that's so easy on this because you're literally just going like, and like you're doing your combos.
Interesting. Yeah. Last question. Is it only used for fighting? Would you ever use them for role playing, driving, ever? I mean,
so actually it's a good question. These also work really well for 2D platformers. So like if you're playing a Mario, right? Because it's only left and right, you're able to move and change direction much quicker than you would be with a thumb on a pad. So again, it's a little bit of a rewiring of the brain, but you can absolutely use it for 2-dimensional games. 3-dimensional games, you have a second axis of motion. You'll notice there's no other movement. So there's no like right stick equivalent. No, it's not going to work for that. But beat 'em ups, 2D platformers, yeah, absolutely.
Wait, one last question. Connection. USB, serial.
So look at this. We got USB-C over here, but also I got where is it? This little dude, which is a Bluetooth adapter.
Okay. Yeah. All right, you sold me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
not
definitely
the tactile feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I don't know if the microphone picks it up.
Oh yeah.
So satisfying. So that's been my obsession last few weeks. But you know what? Cool. I think as an obsession that everyone needs to have, but not enough do, which is the topic of our episode today, absolute immutability or true immutability. I think before we get into some of the nuance of what makes immutability special, we first have to get like just a baseline definition out for our audience. So we work for Object First. We create a storage device that is primarily focused on immutability, but believe it or not, in some of the conversations I have, a lot of folks out there have a very sort of baseline, I would say, not great understanding of what immutability is. It might only go so far as to say worm. So let's do a little around the horn, just talk about what is immutability as a standard. Matt, I'll chuck it to you first.
I think the simplest way to think about it, at least for me, if I was trying to explain it to someone who had never heard the term, is it's like read-only. So it can still be copied, but it can't be deleted. It can't be changed. It still could be viewed, right? So, and this is going to lead us into a greater discussion around things like encryption and so forth. But at the very foundational level, it's something that's read-only that nobody has the ability to mark read-write, right? It's basically like you marked it as read-only and threw away the key, and then somehow you get the key back in X number of days. And that's essentially at the foundational level, the way I would describe it to someone who doesn't really understand, all the nuances behind immutability.
I really don't have too much to add to that. I worked for a little bit of time in the financial industry. I was a network engineer for a bank, and we had to deal with a lot before the term immutability was really super popular. We called it Worm and some other things, but in that particular scenario, it was a way to make sure that we could audit any changes and stop any changes from happening. And of course, now in the days of ransomware, that term immutability means something more for businesses to be able to maintain their continuity. But at the root of it, immutability really means to me where you remove that ability for somebody to change that. But as we've seen, Anthony, not all immutability is that absolute immutability, is it?
No, you're right. And my take, coming from the world of engineering, we always talk about CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. Immutability removes two of those, which is the update and delete. So you could those are your operations you can do. I think that's a good baseline, right? And it's important we set that standard, because a lot of folks probably think, well, immutability means I can do the cur operations, but maybe I can go in as an admin and chmod some things, change some permissions, make some deletions. And I think that's a good place to start when it comes to absolute immutability, is talking a little bit about governance mode versus compliance mode, right? Like, these are two terms that get thrown around a lot when it comes to S3 object storage. But I think we should digest them just a little bit more. So Sterling, I'll start with you this time. Governance mode, compliance mode. What's that all about?
Agreed. I feel like governance mode, had its place. When back in the day, when we started to roll out the security type of things, right? Think about when we started to really create shared architectures where everybody started to share files over the network and things like that. If somebody forgot their password, they had to go back to someone to help them with that password. And so we began to create a society where, okay, here's your password, we can do this, but there's this one person that's going to be able to reverse it all should everything else hit the fan. And I think we've gotten used to that. Well, the issue is the bad guys have also gotten used to that, and they know that there is a way somewhere down the chain for those things to be changed or altered. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to focus on here today. Essentially, governance mode allows that one account to go in to reverse all the security and the great changes that you've implemented. And so the other way, the compliance mode, absolutely removes that ability to do that. And if you have something that's in governance mode, really you'd have to ask yourself, is it truly immutable? If you have an insider attack, can they take that data from you? So to me, that's what those differences mean. They each have a place, but governance mode really doesn't have a place today in keeping your data safe.
Yeah, I don't really, like you said on the last point, Sterling, I really don't have much to add to that. I would just kind of think, when you talk about backup specifically, governance mode should not even be in the conversation. Now, maybe it does have its place in other areas of the business, let's say, but when it comes to protecting your last line of defense, the last thing you want is to purposely open up a security hole that could be a human, whether it's malicious intent, accidental deletion. The fact is, you're knowingly opening that security vulnerability by enabling governance versus compliance. So why would you risk that on backups? It doesn't make any sense to me.
You stole my point, Matt, which was, I was going to say, governance mode has a place, not in backup, which I love. Right. And, we talk a lot about, because our solution to Object First is built on object storage, we talk a lot about S3 and object lock when we talk about our own product, but something that we don't bring up very much is versioning, right? And this is a technology that goes hand in glove with object lock. And what versioning specifically allows you to do is keep versions of objects in that storage for a time window as well. So even you have the immutability, in compliance mode, and then you have versioning, which basically just says like, hey, we're going to keep X number of these things around for X number of time. There's really no way that a solution that has S3 object lock, compliance mode, and versioning on would ever suffer any kind of deletion, update, manipulation of that data, so long as those features are enabled. I just think that's worth calling out, right? Because when we talk about absolute immutability, we're talking about having all three of these things on simultaneously. Mm-hmm. If governance mode is enabled, you might as well just give them access to your storage and say, hey, go delete what you want, right? Because they're going to get in.
Yep.
It's
Where
like
does oh, go
it's
ahead.
like the
Yeah.
janitor with the key ring, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, they could open any door in the entire infrastructure, and that is your vulnerability, whether it's intentional or
What a
unintentional.
great example.
That's a
What a
security
great
risk.
example. With that janitor thing is really understated, Matt. You just killed it with that. Because that's the truth, right? There's the one person who can undo everything. I mean, if you
Yeah,
have all of these things enabled, what does it matter if the bad guy
right.
can go get the janitor's keys?
That's right.
When you said that, I literally got the image in my head of Bart Simpson on a skateboard coming by, yoinking the keys, and then doing whatever malicious little thing he's gonna do. Like, that is such a good example.
Yeah.
Truly.
So I think before we move on into our next section, it's worth to talk a little bit about end-to-end encryption.
Mm-hmm.
Is end-to-end encryption a part of immutability, or is that something that stands on its own that we should, just ensure that is available when we do backups to immutable storage? I'll start with you this time, Matt.
So I think exactly like you said earlier, Anthony, it's, a lot of people maybe are new to immutability. I feel like encryption and immutability are not the same thing, first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost. And like I said earlier, immutability does nothing for the ability of someone to read or even copy the data. So when you think about all the potential vulnerabilities out there with ransomware and malware and just anything really, ransomware and immutability solves for the locking perspective of it, right? The force encryption by a bad actor. What it doesn't solve for is the exfiltration of data. So if somebody were to have a bunch of, let's say, credit card numbers or bank account information, and that data was immutable, but not encrypted, that doesn't solve for anything, because the bad actor could actually, export all that data, leak it, leverage it, whatever they want to do. So you have to have, just like when you talk about versioning and compliance, you have to have end-to-end encryption alongside immutability to truly be immutable. Otherwise, you're leaving the back door open, so to speak.
Amen. I mean, those janitor's keys comes into that scenario as well. So we made it. You can't change it. It's there. It's never gonna move. But the problem is they can steal it and they can read
Right.
it and they still know all your secrets and all of
That's
those
right.
things. And so I think that is a very, very real facet of data safety, data security. It is not the same as immutability, but that is a wide door you're leaving open if you don't encrypt it immediately and keep it encrypted. The idea of taking one wrapper off and putting another wrapper on, gentlemen, I don't even want to get into that.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's worth mentioning that immutability and encryption, I mean, this is peanut butter and jelly, right? You should always have both. If you have one and not the other, you are running a serious risk. So you want to make sure that your solution, maybe it offers all of the tenets of absolute immutability, but if it doesn't support encryption, you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Right.
I also want to mention just real quick, when looking for solutions out there in the wild, whether you're looking at Object First or anyone, be sure to look for third-party testing whenever it's available, right? Because you can make all the claims you'd like at the end of the day, but if you don't have a third-party agency doing penetration and security testing against your box or your software, proving all of the claims you say are true, you might as well just be, putting up a big marketing statement that says, we also solved the energy crisis and can create infinite nuclear energy now with our box. Because without testing, it means nothing, right? So I would
Perpetual motion. Trust us.
Trust us, right? We totally are immutable. We're not going to tell you how, but we totally are. I swear, for real this time. Something Sterling said just a moment ago, right? Maybe it was you, Matt. You two are so similar. I confuse you all the time. You mentioned specifically the time window when it comes to doing encryption, right? Like encrypt right away, so that you don't lose that facet of the written protection of what you're writing.
Yep.
We talk a lot about zero time delay when it comes to absolute immutability. And I think it's a very nuanced concept, right? Like the idea that you're writing to an immutable storage device, and in that writing process, it lands in an immutable bucket. There is no snapshot gap. There is no delay. I'm waiting in a buffer, then I get put in my secure immutable storage. Let's talk about that for a minute. Sterling, I'm curious what your thoughts are when it comes specifically to zero time delay.
Oh boy. Okay. We opened it up. I wasn't going to go there, but now we're going to go there. Listen, all solutions just aren't created the same. And what we're talking about today is making sure people's data stays safe. And if I'm just going to call it out and call it straight, anytime you remove that wrapper of encryption, it's just never good. There are other reasons to remove that. There was a point in time where, for instance, disk space was of the utmost importance. And so you would sometimes want to remove that layer of security so that you could try to dedupe these things, which created some other problems on recovery. Time to recover, being able to have to hydrate those things after deduplication. So not only does it cause some other issues in bringing your data back when you most need it, during that process, you've actually created a much larger attack surface and where your data is now wide open laying on somewhere. So it's not just as important to make sure that the encryption is encrypted from the very beginning. It's important to understand that things are verified and you're not just believing that some solutions are going to keep it safe while it's going through this process. The point is that the second you touch that data, it should be encrypted and it should remain encrypted.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And to me, I mean, we've all heard of 0-day attacks, and we all know that ransomware and threat actors are evolving. They're using AI. I mean, they're getting in and infiltrating before they attack. So the sheer idea of sending data across a network that's not encrypted, landing on storage that's not encrypted, that's just a bad idea. You know, maybe if it was 5 years ago, you might have had a little bit of time, you know, to then mark it encrypted. Not today.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a different world. So I think it also bears, you know, doubling down when we talk about what Veeam sees as best practices with all their analytics and research that they've done in the industry. End-to-end encryption is recommended as a best practice. So you need that from the source, right? That's one end. And it stays encrypted all the way through the transfer, all the way through the data processing, the compression, the dedupe, all the things that happen. Veeam can still apply those space-saving technologies while maintaining the encryption, right? So anytime you try to separate that out and land on something that, let's say, is designed to save space, if you send encrypted data there, you're not going to get any advantages, right? So you really have to look at the holistic solution to make sure that you're using the optimal settings and the optimal storage options to actually maintain that encryption, but also maintain that, you know, compliance and the immutability that we're talking about on the back end with zero time. And I think that is critical.
I
Matt,
agree.
That was an excellent point that Matt just made. And I just want to let everybody who might be listening, whether it's live or on our the restream after, there was a point in time where solutions didn't do this. And what Matt's talking about is being able to create the minimalist amount of the disk space. You don't need the dedupe of the outside hardware type of solutions. There was a point in time where you needed that. The actual data writers didn't do those things as efficiently. Time has moved on. Not only have the threats moved on, but these solutions have gotten better now. And so adding these types of layers on top not only increases complexity, but it increases your time to recovery as well as your attack vector. So I just wanted to double down on that, Matt. It was a very good point.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I want to add one more thing to this, which is snapshots. Right. I think everyone knows if you're in the data protection biz or if you're just in IT, you know what a snapshot is. You know the convenience of it, right? It's a click of a button and almost every take a snapshot. I'm gonna roll back to that. And a lot of these platforms will give you make it immutable, right? That little checkbox of I'm gonna make this snapshot immutable and it's gonna be there forever. So when I get hit, I'm fine. But what that doesn't understand, what folks don't understand when they do that is if the platform itself can be compromised, then it is not immutable, right? Like if that ESX host has administration and administrative privileges, then you can wipe that snapshot away. And it's also worth mentioning, you know, not only is it the fact that it can reside on the host a problem, but also the time it takes to take that snapshot, to put it in there, to then make it immutable. You have gaps in there which can be absolutely used as an attack vector in a breach. So we absolutely we understand why snapshots exist, and there is a point and purpose and reason for them, but they are not a substitute for absolutely immutable backups. So I just wanted to make that point before we move into our next section, which is the importance of having a segmented architecture. I think it's the perfect segue, right? Snapshots are on the device most of the time. Segmentation is huge, right? Using a segmented target storage appliance, using physical hardware. This is a game changer when it comes to backup immutability specifically. So I think I will start with you last time, Sterling. So Matt, why should folks segment and use physical hardware?
Oh, don't you want all your eggs in one basket? Trust us, it's secure.
It's a saying older than any of us.
Trust us.
Yeah, trust us, it'll work. I just feel like when you talk about attack vectors and when you talk about things like blast radiuses or radii or however you say the plural word, so it's always a good idea to separate the lock from the key, so to speak, right? So if somebody infiltrates your Veeam backup server, which can happen, Veeam isn't, completely not susceptible to any type of attacks. You don't also want your backups on that very same machine because the attacker, the software doesn't even have to go searching the network. It's right there, right? And the other thing that I've made the point about before is not only, segregation separating the two apart, but it's also when you look at the way that Veeam communicates with the target storage, the last thing that you would want to see in a Windows environment is like a D drive or an E drive or some mapped drive letter that the software could then just say, oh, look, let's go, encrypt that target as well. And that's one of the advantages of using S3 object storage.
Couldn't agree more. Sterling, what's your thoughts on the target appliance versus everything else out there?
We've been talking a lot today about that total data security picture. And this is the final step of that total data security picture, is actually having those two things separate. I mean, Matt has already talked about this, but when you talk about having the keys to the kingdom, that janitor with the keys, this is removing that last key from that janitor, by the way, because if you're writing something and you have all your data encrypted, and you have all of it in the right place and it's immutable and you move it, you still can go into the larger subsystem and create those changes. If it's virtual, you can completely delete it. If it's physical, you still have the keys through those same leveraged ways to get in to change that data. This is the final way to ensure that if an insider attack, and most of these attacks nowadays are insider attacks, we still have to have the firewalls and the CASBs and all those things that keep our data safe from ingress to egress. But when a person's inside, this is the last step to make sure that you're able to recover. This, to me, is honestly the most necessary step, because even if you miss the other ones, this one could still get you. If you don't have this one, I almost guarantee none of those other matter.
I couldn't agree more. And, we've talked about S3 object lock. We talked about zero time to immutability. We talked about why you want to segment and use a physical appliance. And I think there's one thing that we haven't talked about that really encapsulates all of this. And it's impossible to do it without these things, these sort of three pillars as a foundation, which is zero access for destructive actions, right? The idea that we're not giving anyone, not the vendor, not the admin, not the attacker, no one can go into that device and perform any destructive actions against the firmware, the operating system, the storage layer, the backup data layer. If all of that is protected by following the principles of least privilege access, by following zero trust, and the idea that we're not going to give anyone the ability to go in and commit crimes or acts against the backup storage, you truly have something that is impenetrable. So Sterling, I'm curious, what's been your experience when talking about zero access out in the wild?
I think people understand the concept as far as the zero trust. I think there are a lot of times where people just hadn't thought that far into the fact that my backups are my backups, and I have an admin key, or maybe I'm using some solution which just backs everything up as a domain. They really hadn't thought about the insider access that has access to the actual backup pieces. So there are actually some really great conversations we have out in the field about how they're doing things today, which was fine, once again, to Matt's point, 5 years ago, but may not be pertinent to today. So it's really about understanding that that target backup appliance, the storage appliance, is really that last lever. I think we've moved into a day where you have sort of two camps. You have the people that want to just have the easy button, and they just think everything can kind of go to one place. And then you have those hardcore do-it-yourselfers. I can do this better than companies that have invested millions and millions of dollars to make sure that my data is secure. And both have their points and their reasons for being. But when you want to have the highest level of security for your backups, you really don't want to go it alone. You don't want to leave it up to an update that you accidentally left one attribute off that increases your attack surface. You really want to be able to trust in something. And when you talk about a storage appliance, you want to have something that has been independently verified, has been tested, and comes to you with the set of circumstances that you need. So it's really about just taking the time to understand why everyone did this in the past, the new threats today, and how we should be walking together into the future. And that's what these 3 tenets that we just laid out.
Love it. What about you, Matt?
I'm so glad you said levers, because that was going to be my next little analogy. So you beat me to it. I could not agree with you more. And when you look at, object first and Immutable, we're secure, simple, and powerful, right? One of the things I always say, and I've been saying for years now, is we're secure because we're simple. And to me, that is so important to get, because the more levers you allow people to pull, the more chances either A, mistakes are going to happen, or B, security vulnerabilities will exist whether you want them to or not, because you have to provide access to pull said levers. And to me, that's the most important thing for the second tier of folks that you mentioned, Sterling. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of people that are Linux experts that want to go and build this thing themselves, but if they miss one security permission or don't apply it to subfolders or, things of the sort, they could have the best of intentions, but just make a human error and the data is no longer secure. Or sadly, on the worst case, maybe they are the bad actor, but because you've given them full domain admin and full rights and super users and all the things, now they can go delete the data, whether it's immutable or not, because they can go in there and disable it. So I think that's something that really resonates. And certainly I've heard it when talking, with CISOs and levels like that is, 5 years ago, whatever, we had experts in-house that would do stuff like this. But now, like you said, Sterling, you've got companies that have invested millions to make sure that all those check marks are checked, sent it out, third-party security verification, penetration tested, so that beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it's been proven that, look, all of our levers have been set with Veeam's best practices, and there's no reason you need to change them anyway, right? And we've locked it down and threw away the key. And to me, that's a really important thing to remember.
And the cohesiveness of use, right? We have some very smart ladies and gentlemen out there that can build whatever. I get that. But if one firmware rev doesn't work with the software rev that you had been using, and the actual hardware company messes up and it doesn't, now everything goes down and all of your levers are now inoperable. I think that's a big piece to lean into as well.
Yeah. I'm going to make a bold claim. I'm going to say access is insecurity, right? And think about what that means, right? If you're in cloud, if you're in a virtualized environment, there's always going to be a level of access that is given to an administrator. That administrator is the weakest link in that entire setup, right? Like the virtualization solution, the cloud solution, they could be immaculately built, have no flaws, no errors, no issues, but that administrator can always be compromised. Now, the reason they want the administration is because that's their job, right? That makes them feel secure. But that access is actually creating insecurity, and it's both their insecurity of I need the access, as well as insecurity as a company as a whole. And it's such a psychological thing that I think it's a trap we've fallen into. We've all been in IT probably combined years. We're approaching like 100 years combined IT experience on this call.
You're probably
and
right.
all of us like to be administrators, right? When we build our hosts, when we build our PCs, we want the power, we want the control. And that is the single biggest fault that we have created in our system is us, because we can always be compromised, whether it's because we're disgruntled, whether it's because we get breached, someone gets our password from another service and comes in and hacks us. Yep. Access always creates insecurity, which is why it's so important that you have a physical piece of hardware that offers zero access for destructive actions. So no one can get in there. At Object First, we pair this with 8i support protocol. And if you have an Object First appliance, it takes 2 people on the user's end and 2 support admins on the Object First end to verify that all 4 people are who they say they are before we allow any kind of change to occur on our devices, because we understand it takes that much to ensure that compromise doesn't occur. So, I think as we start to wrap on absolute immutability, you have to think about all of these factors when looking to purchase backup storage today. It's an unfortunate reality of where things are. There is a lot of ways that things can go wrong. And if your backups are hit, you are hosed. You are going to pay the ransom. You do not get to pass go. You don't collect $200. Like it's just an unfortunate reality situation. So one last around the horn, guys. What's your thoughts on all of this? And we'll start with Sterling.
Yeah, just to everybody who's listening, think about your backup strategy right now. Think about all of those different pieces that we ran through with the tenants. Just like you said, Anthony, there are a lot of terms we went through today, and we're here to make it simple for you. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. But we are here because we are the secure, simple, and powerful solution to all of this. So you don't have to remember and you don't have to understand each of these tenets. If you use Object First and you have an Object First appliance, then you know you're covered with each of those things, including the updates and encryption through Veeam and all of those other things. So we're here to make it easy for you. We understand the reasons why a lot of those pieces existed before, but this is a new day, and I think we need to step up to make sure that we have the ability to recover. Matt?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'll throw one more analogy at you guys. I kind of look at this like we've used the castle and the moat analogy plenty of times on the show before. I look at, Anthony made a good point. People, certainly admins, like to have access and they like to have those levers to pull and tweaks to be made, configurations, etc. You go into the castle, there's plenty of doors with keys. Let them have the keys to those doors. The door marked backup has no lock. Like there is no key that will open it. It's just a sheet of steel. And that's really what we're trying to get at here. It's like you drop the solution in, that's your last line of defense. So the last thing you want is to have anyone, any human on earth, the ability to make destructive actions, whether they're intentional or, unintentional. And I think that's what's fundamentally so important when you look at the solution that we built here at Object First, is we've done it in accordance with Veeam's best practices. We've thrown away the key. We've had third-party, companies actually test this solution, and their results, when all the secrets are known, your data is still safe. And to me, that is all that should matter when you're looking at an ironclad on-prem data protection storage target. And that's really, I think that's what we've delivered as a company.
Well said.
Anthony?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to your point, Matt, the third-party testing is so huge. We used NCC in the past to do penetration testing, but we teased it at the beginning. On our next episode of Zero Gravity Live, we're going to be bringing on Brian Beeler, and he's going to be talking all about our latest hardware iterations. We sent them to him. He got hands-on time with them, and we're going to bring him on and have him tell us all about his experience. So if you don't believe us, and if you don't believe the third-party testing, then maybe you'll believe Mr. Brian Beeler of Storage Review. So be sure to tune into that next episode as he comes on and tells you his experience with our Object First devices. I think it's going to be a great time, and I'm sure we'll all learn something. I know anytime I get a chance to spend time with Brian, it is a fun time. So we're going to have fun and we're going to learn something, I'm sure.
That's going to be awesome.
Well, gentlemen, thank you as always for joining me on Zero Gravity. Thanks, Sterling. Thanks, Matt. Y'all brought the insights today. If you, the viewer, are curious to learn more about what our definition of absolute immutability is, keep your eyes peeled and tuned on either our LinkedIn or our website. We'll be posting some literature on it very soon that outlines everything we've said today and a whole lot more. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And be sure to join us next month on August the, hold on. August, Outlook's being slow, shocking. August the 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Brian Beeler from Storage Review comes on and gives us his impressions of our latest hardware. Please join us for that. But until then, stay frictionless, stay weightless, stay zero gravity.